What's a good word, everyone? It's your boy DKB here. I just want to say thanks for all the support. The channel's been steadily growing, and the number you see below, you can drop a text, shoot a voicemail, any ideas, topics, collabs, etc. you guys want to see. I'll include them in future videos and live streams, and I'll catch you again. Be easy. What's the good word, Jets fans? It's your boy DKB here, and what a day it was yesterday. Aaron Glenn, Darren Mougey, hard work on the phones trying to identify who they think can help improve this team last minute, and it comes at a position that they were ridiculed for not properly addressing over the course of the offseason with free agency in the draft, and included undrafted free agency, not really any moves that people would feel like moved the needle or significantly changed or altered the way that we expected that unit to perform. So coming off of a day where we executed not just one but two trades to bring in guys that feel like no matter what we're going to end up on someone's roster as opposed to a practice squad is a plus for us. Now, I will be curious in both of these events, and we'll have a breakdown of the players here in a second, but I am curious what this looks like, right? Because I don't think this necessarily guarantees that these guys will make the roster. And we'll talk about that when I go live tomorrow. But also, it doesn't guarantee them a roster spot, but I think it's more likely than not that you don't spend what you spent on these guys or invest, just period, into these players, and you think that they don't have a realistic chance of making the roster in 3 weeks. So let's talk about the first trade here that we pulled off with the Cleveland Browns to bring over defensive tackle Jowon Briggs. I really wish it was, I feel like the pronunciation should be Jowon. For some reason, I like that name better, but nonetheless, we bring him in as a 6'1", 313-pound force in the middle of the defense. 23 years young, which you absolutely love, and he's a former 7th-round pick in the 2024 NFL draft, and I was trying to figure out why he was kept being referred to as an exclusive rights free agent in 2026, and it was because the team cut him and brought him back on a 1-year deal. So unlike the second player, he's going to have to work his way into getting some kind of extension if he wants to return to the New York Jets next year after getting the Eric Washington experience under Aaron Glenn's leadership. Now, to execute this trade, we ended up sending the Browns a 2026 6th-round pick. In return, we got Briggs, and we got a 2026 7th. So day 3 swap of picks there. And one of the things that you really like is there's some upside here. And this matches the theme of exactly what you've seen out of anybody else that we brought in over the course of this offseason. When you want to look at Coward, when you want to look at Tufele, even the UDFAs, since we didn't get a chance to invest in the draft itself, all of these guys had something that kind of stood out about their game or an aspect that they were able to relatively complete consistently, which we know is a huge thing for this coaching staff. So with 52% of his defensive snaps against the run coming as a 3-tech in college, you already get an idea of what he was going to be about. And the Cleveland Browns found a way to keep him in that role. The same way that you've seen Robert Saleh perfectly execute having Bryce Huff generally on all passing downs, and it was rare that you've seen him on rushing downs. It's the inverse here for Briggs, where the team was able to find a way to keep him on the field for rushing attempts, and then they were swapping him out for pass rush opportunities since he is not as well versed in that particular area. So understand this is about making sure we are better, tougher, stronger against the run game. And much like we've seen out of Tufele, if you can get something to pop in the pass rush department, that's just going to be cherries on top. And, the chef's kiss, if you will, of being able to pick up some of these guys. So he did play 6 games as a rookie. 53% of his snaps came on run plays, which is akin to what was happening for him in college. And he executed pretty well. He had 7 run stops on just 70 snaps against the run. This made him 11th out of 157 qualified defensive tackles who had a minimum of 70 run defense snaps, which would give him his, in regards to his run stop rate, right? That puts him at 11th out of the entire defensive tackle, / nose tackle unit from 2024. Per PFF, he also graded as the 20th best defensive tackle to play at least 30 snaps over the last 5 weeks of the season. So one of the things, if you are going to look to buy high on some of these players, is you don't want to see early flashes and then suddenly things fizzle out and it's just a dim light on the rest of the season for them. If you get nothing the first 10 weeks and then suddenly the last 8, you really start to see a guy shine, especially if you're talking about being a playoff team and different elements like that. That is huge. So everything is looking good for him in terms of the needle pointing up. And the reason we were able to capitalize him on acquiring him in the first place is that the Browns just have a loaded defensive line, and specifically when you look at the defensive tackle unit and what they're carrying over there, especially guys that could also play that JFM type role and reduce inside that would have ended up making him a cut candidate anyways. It's a win-win here for both sides, and again, very curious if he plays on Friday along with the next man here we're about to talk about, but nonetheless, both of these players will probably end up being very, I don't know what word I was looking here for, but they're going to be behind the scenes. It's going to be hidden. We're probably going to forget about these names after a couple of days because we're not going to really be privy to what's happening as the Jets prepare for their Steelers matchup in week 1. So outside of them making the roster and seeing what happens there, we'll have to see what they actually look like once the games officially matter and how much they will fit into the rotation and really how much they can keep up with getting acclimated to the playbook and then being able to go out there and take that to the field. Now, the second guy, extremely excited about. One of the big perks here with acquiring Harrison Phillips from the Minnesota Vikings was not only the capital spent, right? You talk about the trade breakdown itself. The Vikings got a 2026 sixth rounder from us and a 2027 sixth rounder. We picked up Harrison Phillips and we picked up a 2027 seventh rounder from him. So giving up a couple day 3 picks and then swapping one of the others essentially. This is basically the Briggs trade plus a additional 6th rounder for the Vikings, but well worth the draft capital spent because this is a guy that immediately can come in and challenge to be lined up next to Quentin Williams. He's not coming in and being looked at as the 3rd or 4th string guy, and he's just a better version of whoever we would have had there. This is a legitimate starter that you brought in, and you find him ahead of the waiver wire and in another scenario where he was going to potentially be cut as a odd man out here just based on what was invested into the unit for the Minnesota Vikings. So per Thor Nystrom, I did find it interesting that he highlighted the fact that we did beat out a couple of the teams that were also making calls, and even more so had actually made offers to the Minnesota Vikings. Who knows if they were better or worse? I'm not even familiar with what the teams are, but you can kind of guess. Teams like the Cowboys, for example, that can also use some help on the interior. But he's coming in at 6'3", 303 pounds. He was a former Bill. It's a name that I remember being pretty intimately remembering some of the Bills roster and who was back there not so long ago. Him being picked up in the 3rd round of the 2018 NFL draft. 29 years old, so you're still getting a guy that's just coming out of his prime years, and maybe depending on who you ask, entering his prime years, but he doesn't have a ton of wear and tear on him because he also didn't really have a significant role with the Bills until 2021, and then he parlayed that into being able to join the Vikings and start being a consistent contributor and impact player for them. And you're essentially getting somewhat of I don't know for sure if he ever was a captain, but many of the players and beat writers that I saw that reported on Harrison Phillips, not only as part of this trade, but also just looking back at what's happened over the last couple of years with them, they've referred to him as, of course, the veteran leadership, but also the glue of that defensive unit. And really, when you want to look at what Brian Flores was doing, he was a pivotal part of the emphasis on the run defense that he looks to deploy there. And you see a lot of stuff that he does that's really exciting with the linebackers and things of that nature. But it's guys like Harrison Phillips that make it work up front and give the linebackers the opportunity, Calvin Pace, etc., to make all of the plays that they were making. 62 game starter, One of the things I love is that there were some injury concerns with him earlier in his career, but he really shook that off, and he hasn't missed a regular season game since his last year with Buffalo in 2021. The part of this deal was also that the Vikings were able to, or willing and able to, eat some of his contract where he was owed around $7 million this year. They took on $3.7 million. We're paying about another $3.7 million in terms of the cap hit for him this year. Played as a one tech among a few other roles within Brian Flores' scheme, but this is also a guy that isn't going to offer a ton of pass rush, but definitely at a better rate than what you would have got out of Briggs. Run defense is definitely up there in terms of league play with what he was doing. And when you consider that, you can also make the argument Brian Flores had to play him out of position due to injuries, amongst a few other potential reasons that would have been out there. They had him lined up as a one tech, but he still had 60 stops over the last 2 seasons. Put that in comparison, for example, to the 7 run stops we talked about in 70 snaps with Briggs. It seems like a pretty significant number. He lined up over center 250 times over his first couple years, going into 2023 with the Bills and, of course, the Vikings before things changed. In 2023, he lined up over center 205 times. And I say this, by the way, because this isn't exactly where you want to see him at. You want to see him shaded off of the left or right shoulder of the center. You want to see him really attacking more the B gaps when necessary. But he's essentially matched his total for his entire career prior to things going awry, with 249 snaps being lined up over center. So you imagine that this staff will look at him, and of course some people are going to have to do things that just don't fit their skill set the best, but you also imagine there's going to be an easy return to what he does well, shading him, allowing him to attack the B gaps, and really just switching and moving him up all along the defensive line, which he's going to have the opportunity to. So really excited about him. I'm really just curious, right? Because you want to talk about him also coming and having that playoff pedigree and stuff. And while he may not be the playoff or Super Bowl champion, kind of like we got out of Derek Nottie and what we were expecting, because he's still going to be able to perform at a better level than what Derek Nottie is probably going to mean more to the players when he's speaking about what needs to get done in order to get things accomplished as a defense for us. So let me know what you guys think. Ultimately, I think these were 2 successful trades pulled off in the same day. I can see both of these guys making the roster. I can see why you pulled off the trade for these 2. And there's also I might do a separate video for this. I might make a post, I'm not sure. But there's a sneaky new rule around injuries and stuff that goes on that may allow us to essentially keep everybody, at least for the first couple weeks of the regular season or so. So let me know what you guys think about the trades. I'll catch you guys again. Peace.